Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I want to make sure we can see everybody in whoever's got videos on. Hi, Shri. Hi, everybody. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I know there is a tight schedule today with people who are celebrating Dhanteras. There's the pujas going on. I know we've got, tennis lessons and sports games. So I am so excited, though, for us to have our monthly book club this month. We are joined with author Shailee Mehta. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Radha Patel. I'm the founder of Single to Shaadi. Most of you guys got here through our platform, so you know a little bit about what we do, but if not, definitely ping me or reach out to me later. What I'm really excited about is the fact that we have this lots of free, low key opportunities for you singles to interact with other singles, for people to kind of meet and discuss and maybe like share stories, share tips, and also, share experiences and build connections, build community. So because of that, we like to invite South Asian authors or people that have lived in these South Asian dating and relationship experiences spaces. I was lucky enough to meet Shaylee earlier this year when she and I both were on a panel together through another amazing organization called Jiva Health. Definitely look them up if you guys have a chance. They're a nonprofit based out of the West Coast. But we connected through that, and I really resonated with Shaylee's story at that time. And then come to find out, she wrote a book or she compiled a book, as we're going to talk about in a little bit. So, with that, I'm going to do my little spiel and we'll tee it over to Shaylee. Welcome, guys. Today, in her thought provoking debut, Shailee Mehta explores the intricacies and taboos surrounding divorce in South Asian communities. This book sheds light on the cultural and societal pressures that influence marital decisions and offers a fresh perspective on a topic that's shrouded in silence. Shailee, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. And thank you for reading the book. This was a project, I want to say, of passion. I actually went through a divorce about, I don't know, 15 years ago in 2009. And it was a hard decision because I am South Asian Indian and I come from a community that it is not a popular choice. But when I decided, I made the decision and I stuck with it. And I wanted to talk about it with other people. I wanted to put it out there because I think if we don't talk about things, then it's always going to be shrouded, as Radha was saying, in shame and, hidden behind closed doors. But if we talk about these things, it becomes less shameful. It becomes something we can all relate to because part of it isn't even just talking about divorce itself, but relationships, mental health, issues we have with our parents growing up in America is it's a for our generation is a whole new thing. Um, there's just so many aspects to it, and I wanted to put that together and put it out there just so people know that there is somebody that is like I'm willing to be open about it because if it doesn't start here, where else does it start?
Absolutely. And, for those of you who do read the book, if not, it's totally fine. There's a lot of topics that we can still cover. But if you did read the book, one through line I'll say is just how much I resonated. Like I saw myself in so many of those stories in one snippet or another, right? Like these were real people that lived, that we could identify with. And maybe learn something from and maybe take away that made us stronger. So I really appreciated that people got vulnerable because, like you said, in our community, we don't get vulnerable.
Right.
Uh,
No, and yeah, no, we definitely don't. I think it's even hard now when we're feeling something to reach out. I think we've gotten better about it to reach out and say, I'm not okay right now. And even after all I've been through, I was dealing with something and am still dealing with some personal things over the last month where I forgot that I've built a community at this point and I just needed to reach out. But it's not ingrained. It is an actual action I have to think about whenever I do it.
and it's ironic because so much we see in the book too that people are always like, what are the community gonna think? We have
Yeah.
this fake or on paper sense of community, but when we really need somebody or a community that identifies and resonates with our thoughts and feelings, that's where we never developed or cultivated it. Wow.
Right. And I think our generation has at least become more emotionally aware in our 20s, maybe, I want to say, maybe even as late as our 30s. We've opened up talking about mental health, therapy, you know, issues and trauma we had as kids growing up here. We've opened up a lot of these topics. So I'm hoping that this is just another way we can discuss a lot of these things that we're all going through.
Yeah. When I was, putting together the document for today and all that, I Googled Indians don't get divorced. And while it's great that your book comes up, so many other hits, articles, stories with that same kind of title or concept came up. So, Shayla,
Mhm.
let me ask you, where did you find the people in the subjects for your stories, or how did you decide to compile this?
Well, it's loosely based on reality. It's fictionalized. It's heavily fictionalized, mostly to protect privacy. But I mean, I realized when I got divorced and I would mention it to people in a social setting, how many women would come up, or even men would come up to me and just be like, I'm divorced too. But they'd say it like under their breath as if it was still something to be ashamed of. So I met so many people because I was open about it, that had gone through the same thing. And actually because I openly talked about it, even later as people were going through it, they would all of a sudden reach out and be like, I'm going through this. What do I do? How do I deal? Am I making the right decision? And I just talk about my experience with them, and hopefully it led them to make whatever choice was correct for them at the time. So they were just people that I loosely knew stories, like obviously there's parts of it that are fictionalized because there are parts that I definitely wanted to address, whether or not people had gone through it or not. But there are things that I think were relatable in all senses. But there are enough people out there. So I think every single one of us, to some extent, can relate to one person or another, in these stories.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's what
Yeah.
I took away from it immediately. So, the friends on the chat, you guys are welcome to jump in. You can either type in questions in the chat or, come on camera or audio. We have some overarching themes that, we saw as through lines through the book. So I will continue peppering you with questions, Shaylee, but please, if you guys have questions, jump on board. Just in the chat, show of hands, how many people have read the book or at least have a copy or like and thumbing through it or kindling through it is what I did. Do a thumbs up. I think there's like a reaction button down there too. So, okay. All right. So I think the biggest reason or the biggest, the theme, Indians don't get divorced, the Indians piece, that cultural part of it. So you're Gujarati, I'm Gujarati. Like, I liked how you got granular with some of those stories, but there's also that overarching through line for other cultures. So can you tell us a little bit, Shaylee, like how the book is talking about that stigma that is happening in like the Indian American culture? Like it's contemporary is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, we're growing up, number one, I think a huge thing, and I don't know if this is mentioned enough. I tend to bring it up every time I do any sort of talk. We grew up with 90s Bollywood movies. I think that is a big influence. So we're not only growing up with parents that have immigrated from India that are 20 years old, 25 years old, immigrating, and what they know is each other. They rely on each other, they support each other. And there's no other aspect of that, right? You're married, you're meant to be together, and that's what it is. You're growing this family, but they're also growing up together. Um, so I think that's a huge thing. And then you add in this layer of Bollywood that all we did was watch Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan and Salman Khan love and marry people over and over again. And I believe romance was this, I believe romance was that. And that's the cultural influence I got growing up as a teenager here. Um, this doesn't even go into fairy tales and all those things. That was there as well. But I think the pressure of what was expected still stem back from what our parents grew up with. This idea that you go to high school, you go to college, you get married, you have kids. That's it. That's the track. And if you fall off the track somehow, something went wrong. Um, but that, even as an Indian American in our generation, I think that was the plan. And I know a ton of people, including myself, that did exactly that. luckily it looks like a lot of them made it through, and that's great. But there are some of us that did fall off the beaten track, and we had to kind of change the way we viewed ourselves. We had to change the way our families viewed us and the community viewed us. Um, and it's not easy. It's not easy. You're taking on all these thoughts and ideas that everyone grew up with and saying, no, I don't believe that. I'm willing to fight this entire community just so I can find happiness, for myself. But I think that was a huge thing, like having all those influences kind of there and that pressure to follow what we're supposed to be doing and then changing the idea. It's you're taking the instructions and saying these instructions don't work anymore. We got to change it to something new.
Shaylee, you know what it means when you fall off the beaten path? That means you're a trailblazer. Like you're literally creating a new path for so many women, like giving them the space, women and men, giving them the
Yeah.
space to, realize that they are not stuck. So things
No.
are changing. You guys, you and the people that influence the book are helping us change that narrative. What do you think about like this new generation, right? Like this Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like these kids out here, 13-year-old. My son is 13 and he's flirting with girls, right? Like, well, what do you see? How are we changing as a community to get this stigma out of there?
So I don't know as a community because I think my community is in a bubble that is different from a lot of other communities. Um, my community it becomes what you make of it, right? And so the people I'm around, Indian or not, are very mental health driven, are very open about things, liberal about what they believe in. And so the way they speak to their kids about certain things is different. But now I go to places where I see the traditional, kind of what I grew up with, and I still hear the parents saying the same things that parents said 20, 30 years ago. So I don't know if it's changing for everyone. Now, in my case, with my kids, we don't say when you get married. That is just, it's not an acceptable phrase. If and when, it is always your choice if you want to get married. If you like a girl or a boy, it doesn't matter. It's just what you choose. And everything is just a different choice. There is no right or wrong as long as you're making good decisions for yourself as a human. So I'm hoping there are more people that are kind of speaking to their children like that. I couldn't tell you for sure because again, my bubble has become people I relate to, I'm comfortable with. And until I do talks and I'm interacting with people out there, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's what I'm raising my kids that way as well. So I think it
Yeah.
starts with this generation normalizing or accepting it and showing it and just being decent human beings about it. Um, I would like to just read some of the comments here. Mohini mentioned that she could relate to what your topic. She followed her path until she realized it wasn't her path.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about Moini, and she's absolutely out here again, another trailblazer, really creating community and holding space. And if she wants to talk, she's welcome to. Marilyn also said, in each story, I saw a little bit of myself in every scenario described. So earlier I said, Shayla, you really did a good job finding pieces to make sure it resonated with all types of Indians. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about family, right?
Sure.
There's mention about, ooh, what happens with the kids, or thank God we didn't have kids. How
Yeah.
many, or in what ways is the family expectation, whether it's the pressure to have family and have kids, because we've already gotten to the married part, but like I said, the pressure to have kids, how much does that influence their like staying together relationship?
Um, I mean, it depends how you take having kids. If you take it as something that's going to fix something that is not, working the way you thought it would, no, it never does. Kids are going to test the heck out of any marriage. It does not matter how good it is. And I think that is something people need to get. We need to put it out there that kids, no matter the best relationship ever, kids are going to test it because they're tough and raising children is tough. For me in particular, I think when it came time to make that decision if I was going to have a child with this man or not, that was my breaking point. Because it was like, if I have a kid, if we're actively deciding to have a child and I'm miserable already, that means that I am connected to this person forever. And whether we're together or not. And I think for me, that was definitely a breaking point. But in terms of staying together or getting divorced after having kids, unfortunately, I can't really speak to it because I made the choice to leave before. And I think it would affect it if I ever thought about it now when I do have children. I would want what's best for them. I also wouldn't want to be miserable all the time. So it would be a two-sided evaluation. And then comes in, your therapist, your friends, your community. You go through the process and you figure out what works and what is something that might be fixable and what is something that is a deal breaker and it's just not going to. Are you happier separate? And will the kids be happier if you two aren't fighting or cold shouldering or whatever it is all the time? So I think it is a personal decision, but I think, you do um, have to kind of take a step back and get a third opinion, get a third outside or fourth outside opinion that has no connection to you or your spouse, because that will be one of your saving graces if you're going through it.
Because the third party should be, or you're saying like therapy or something's just somewhere out there, but if not, at least get a objective or as close to objective third party. I agree because a lot of times we haven't seen divorces modeled in our community, just like we haven't seen healthy marriages, we haven't seen divorces. So
Right.
forget the stigma. We don't even know where to start, right? Like how do we legally get started? Who can I reach out to? So there's so much. And if we have this support, the community, the discussions, these books, at least we know where we can start.
There are plenty of, at this point, I couldn't even tell you how many lawyers I know in our community. There are going to be lawyers that can at least give you advice one way or the other. There are people who've gone through it. I had a friend, actually, I had a friend's husband call me. And because I'd known both of them for a fair amount of time, and he was like, "We are having these issues. Tell me what you went through so I can kind of figure this out." And we talked about it. They actually chose to stay together and are still married. But, um, talk to somebody that can give you some sort of feedback in a neutral way where it's more you're getting, I guess, clarity in what you want and what you're comfortable with. It wasn't until I talked to a friend about how miserable I was that I really admitted that I did not want to be in the marriage anymore. And it was like a whole breakdown, meltdown. And once that happened, it was just very clear that I was miserable. I was holding it together and I was holding it together for years. But until that one particular situation happened, you know, it was like, okay, I can't do this. It's done. And then I couldn't lie to myself once I said it. So
You said something interesting, neutral, but then you mentioned that one friend. I would also caution, this is something I say on the coaching side too.
yeah,
Friends are great to lean on, but make sure their intent, their purpose is helpful. One of the
yeah,
narratives in the book, she says that how she didn't have that depth of relationship with her friendships, so she had to fake it all the time. So
yeah.
she didn't have like even friends that would probably like be on her side or give her that good opinion.
Right, right. Yeah, it has to be. I mean, it definitely has to be a deeper friendship where you have vulnerable moments with them where they can kind of see what's kind of really going on. And I know, I mean, I've been lucky enough to find a few people here and there that really understand what that bottom layer of me is, even if I can't see it clearly. But sometimes I forget they exist. Like you go on your daily life and you're like, oh yeah, there's this person that really gets me. And, and sometimes it has to be like my current husband gets me really well, but sometimes it just needs to be somebody outside of our current life because we're in it together.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes it could just be us, right? Like it has nothing to do with it. It's just how we're interpreting the interaction or whatever, right? So
yeah,
getting that opinion.
absolutely. And I mean, for me, one of the things I've been dealing with is past trauma. That it something got triggered and it has nothing to do more or less with the person that triggered it. It's really just something that from my past came and knocked me in the face. And I just have to kind of work through it. And I've been doing that because I didn't expect it. It just happened.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good segue to talking about mental health when it comes to divorce. You did a lot of discussion around mental health, therapy, seeking help. I
yeah.
want to read some comments real quick though. Ankita said, "You were lucky to have that foresight. I think many women or men, they think somehow that starting a family together is," she put together in quotes. I love that. Starting a family together will somehow bring this couple closer when there's still a disconnection. that negative
Yeah.
ongoing narrative. It'll get better if we do this. It'll get better when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm telling you that after having, especially my first kid who hated sleep and probably still does, even though it's 10 years later, it's, and now she's heading into preteen, all that stuff. You have to have a team. You have to have a solid team, and you have to have someone who'll have your back with your kids, because that's not just going to happen. And then you're going to end up resenting each other anyways.
Yeah, faking it is exhausting, like Moini said. So,
Yeah.
about mental health a little bit, kind of same
Sure.
big question. Indians don't get divorced, Indians don't go to therapy. So, talk a little bit about kind of like why is it the same side of stigma about log kya kehenge? Is it a different stigma?
Um, I think it's the same. If we don't present perfect in our community, it's we're somehow damaged. Um, I changed majors in college from one thing to another. I thought, that I was going to be a failure in that. I, clearly left a marriage. Like, I went to therapy. I've been diagnosed with depression. I definitely have anxiety. Like, but let me put it this way. There was a quote I saw from Brene Brown, and I wanted to read it because this resonated so much. Is that sharing experiences and talking about shame can help dismantle its power. Shame is a painful feeling that can make people feel unworthy of love, connection, and belonging. And when you keep your shame hidden, it can fester and make them feel more isolated. Empathy, another part of a different quote, is empathy, on the other hand, can have an opposite effect. And I think it's so important to realize the second you start talking about it, all of it gets easier because now you're lightening your load, you're unburdening a little bit. Um, so for me, when okay, so I probably had a version of depression. This is the self-diagnosis when I was a teenager. But again, I hadn't seen a therapist. I didn't know anything about mental health. And so there were probably versions of it through my life, that and anxiety. But until I went to started going through my divorce, my mom actually introduced me with someone that's a family friend that she knew who had gone through it. And she sat me down with him and said, go talk. First thing he told me is get a therapist. Literally, first piece of advice. Indian, and he was an Indian guy.
Wow.
And he said, get a therapist. It still took me another 3, 4 months to do it until I was in a friend's apartment, like 350 miles away from my family's home because I had to get away from them,
Hmm.
sobbing. And I finally went into my insurance and said, what therapist can I afford? And that lady is still my therapist today.
Wow.
Um, so it was a good pick. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, right? And as I tell my kids, a therapist is literally just a doctor for your mind and your emotions. Like, it is to help the mental side of you. And you go to a physical doctor. I mean, after 40, I'm going to how many doctors for checking every single little thing. Um, so I've even introduced the idea of it to my daughter to see like her school psychologist whenever she's not feeling, with all the stuff going on growing up,
Yeah.
teenager, preteen, all that. And I'm like, go talk to her. This lady is wonderful. She has the experience. She's super nice. And so I'm hoping that with the next gen, they'll kind of realize that this is normal. Like, it's okay to talk about this stuff, and it's okay to seek help when you're not okay.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I know people worry about it. And I think the more we as collectively as a group band together and say, hey, yes, I've seen a therapist, or I am currently, I mean, there, I feel like for a few years I was just talking, I was chatting with her
Right.
every 4 to 6 weeks. But lately, with this new trauma thing that crept up, I'm like, well, now I need to talk to you all the time.
Right.
But I'm glad that that maintenance was there. And now we're in kind of, crisis mode. So we're figuring it out.
Well, and you have that person who knows you, who's seen you, and
Yes.
it'll be so much faster to get to whatever you need. That's wonderful. Yeah, but I agree.
Yeah.
Like one of the silver linings of COVID is that it normalized therapy. You can do it from home now. You have this
Yes.
person in your pocket. Chat GPT. I'm not a mental health professional by any means, but I know that some people are using that, and it's helping in some cases. I don't know. So
Yeah.
we're talking about it more. We know what words to use a little bit more. Swetha said that, her husband had mental health issues and she wasn't aware about it when they got married. It got worse with
Mhm.
life and marriage stressors, things like that. Again, I
Yeah,
think our community does a lot to hide these things.
exactly. If you're not presenting perfect, it's where we're damaged. My ex actually mentioned to me at one of our after we finalized and it just wrapping up stuff that we'd have to like individually look for partners soon because and this is I mean I would this is 10 years ago, 15 years ago that we were considered damaged goods. So my ex had the same mentality that if he didn't get married right away, and I was just like, what, you know, at that point I'm disengaged, but there's nothing, I didn't believe that for a second. For me, if I was going to get married, it really had to be something I was not settling for. I wasn't going to get married to get married. And I think if I didn't really want kids, I probably wouldn't have gotten married. Um, just because like I didn't see any other big reason to necessarily do it
Hmm.
at that point in my life because I'd already been through this traumatic experience. So,
Right. The partnership was not what you needed at that time but with
right.
the children and the family, you were creating family at that time. Yeah. Awesome.
That's, yeah, and that's a whole different thing. But again, I would not have done it. I would not have had kids with just anybody. Like it had to be somebody that really fit what I needed. And luckily I found it, but you know, I didn't know I was going to find it.
I get a lot of clients when we just do the intake, we ask about children and stuff. And you know what? They say exactly what you said. I would, but I need to know my partner is solid. I need to know things are
Mhm.
good. I need to know like I'm going to be healthy and in the right part of the country and all that. And then we have a category that says open instead of yes or no, it says open. And I think that just we don't know how to talk about that. Like that's not the right word to use, open. Like I don't know. Like I just think that we should have like a third choice or a different way to express it, regardless of if it's first time, second time, whatever, right? In your situation
Yeah.
about children. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Culturally, so I think another interesting part of the book was not everybody had a quote unquote love marriage, right? And not everybody had a arranged marriage. So, I think we always hear that Indians don't get divorced because arranged marriages 99% never get divorced. That's not a good thing either. So, what would you I mean, I know we keep saying like culturally what, but again, why would you why would you think that or where does it come up that this idea that if it's arranged is always going to be perfect and there's not going to be anything wrong?
I think it's honestly the idea that if you went into arranged marriage, you were kind of following a traditional path. And so you probably stuck to the traditional idea that you're not getting divorced. Whereas, well, love marriage, I mean, it could go either way. Maybe it was easy to do in your family, maybe it wasn't, but you're still breaking tradition to some degree. And so, you know, it doesn't actually matter. A love marriage can get divorced, an arranged marriage can get divorced. The relationship has to be strong. And, you know, if there is some disconnect, you have to work to connect it. This isn't something that goes away. This is going to repeat throughout your marriage, you know, as life changes. Every time there's a big change of, you know, in your lifestyle that you're going to have to kind of figure out with your spouse what your new norm is. Um, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't know if arranged in our what does that even mean anymore? Like, does it mean blind dates? Does it mean online? Like, it's
I
not
call
like
it
anyone's going
reduced, right?
to,
Nobody's forcing anybody to get married, but
not anymore.
mom and
Nobody's
dad
going to a
setting
mandap
yeah.
and sitting down and realizing that this is the person I married after they, you know, did the fera. Like, that's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So, it's really just a setup at this point. So I don't know. The arranged marriage thing, it depends on your definition at this point, because I think it's changed so much through the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah. Ankita, I'm just going to read this verbatim. Speaking to marriages with people who have NPD or narcissistic qualities, their root wound is deep, unresolved shame, and they attach reciprocally to empaths. Those of us with insecure attachment who are pleasers and toxic empaths stay in these abusive relationships, seeing abusive partner shame and thinking somehow we can help them heal, when of course no one can help them heal because it's their personality disorder. In my experience, couples therapy was weaponized against me since I was vulnerable about my traumas and he wasn't. That wasn't the first story with Anjali. I know they didn't get to therapy, but
Yeah.
he made her feel like she was the one who did everything wrong. She was not pretty enough, not good enough, da 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 da. So that
Hmm.
shame really resonated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was interesting. That's an interesting comment about empaths. So I personally am an empath. I take on everybody's emotions. So when everyone is struggling in my house, I'm sitting in a bathroom crying because I'm feeling it's, and I didn't even realize this until recently, but I'm literally pulling in everyone's stress into myself and then I, implode. But I didn't realize that people with, then you would classify, was it Naveen, as a narcissist, right? And then that would make Anjali the empath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
I think it comes down to like attachment theory, having like secure or insecure attachment, and people with anxious attachment tend to be more of the empathic, communicative, expressive, and then those with the avoidant attachment tend, and those are both insecure attachment traits. The avoidant attachers tend to be like they shut down, you get like, and so you get some of those narcissistic traits because they find workarounds to closeness and intimacy and connection and conflict
Right.
repair. And that's where you get the gaslighting and the displacement and the lying and the stonewalling. So it goes like round and round. So while on the surface one is the abuser and one is the victim, really the enemy is that dynamic. And that's where,
Yeah.
I think good couples therapist with somebody, who has training in trauma and personality disorders and these things can be really powerful only if both are actively engaged and doing their individual work. And that's just, it's asking a lot in our culture. It's like, oh my God, we're so far from, especially desi men, like
Yes.
getting in line for that. And they have
Yeah.
so many flying monkeys, right? Generally speaking, they're going to have a lineup of friends and family that are putting them on a pedestal, and all fingers point to the wife being the problem. And because she's the one crying, she's the one complaining, she's the one nagging, he's fine,
Right.
his needs are met. So it's like there's just the woman in the corner that's just never satisfied and never happy. And yeah, round and round we go.
So on that note, we had my mom had a running theory in our family because I don't think a single one of us females in our generation married a Gujarati man. I did, but then I divorced him.
Yeah.
Um, but in our current group of people that are my cousins, relatives, not a single one of us married a Gujarati man. And the running theory is that and this is obviously, it's a very generalized statement. Obviously, it's not all Gujarati men by any means. I grew up with, my father is excellent, participates in everything. Like, I just want to put it out there. I don't want anyone to take offense. But the theory in general was they're happy where they are, being taken care of by their moms, then their wives, and
Yep.
whatever. Where we changed who we were to, we got to a point where we were educated. We did not need financial support. We could handle ourselves, handle our things, and we realized there's no reason to get married to someone who makes us feel less.
Yep.
Um, so instead of restricting ourselves culturally, we looked outward and found somebody that fit us a little bit more emotionally because I can pay for my own life. So the dynamic has changed. Now we trying to be a little bit more equal. And I think with it, there are Gujarati men, of course, that that are involved, that are definitely the kind of man that you'd want in your family, but
It's like the
that's, you
exception.
know,
Like the exception. It's really hard to find that, especially the generation below the immigrant generation. It's
right,
deeply entrenched, this idea that,
right.
like you said, you just go from mom's hand to wife's hand. And not only that, but that the expectation that the wife starts to take over care of the mother and only his mother, right? Like it's
I
wild.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to kind of see as the generation goes on and what's going to happen in the next generation. But I think if we kind of raise our kids with this, idea of respecting and knowing that, especially the boys, our little boys, should be able to participate fully. So my husband does participate fully, right? I don't do his laundry. I don't touch his laundry. Um, if I'm working late, he's cooking. Like that balance is there. So, and actually, he enjoys cooking more than I do. I do it just to make sure people get fed. He actually puts some heart into it. So that balance is a little bit more there, but that's because I actively went into this now looking for something where that was the case also.
I know with my husband, and I've heard it a lot with other guys too, is they miss not having an active father. So they want to be active fathers, right?
Yeah.
Like, not saying their dads were bad, but like they weren't at the
No.
games and they weren't like paying attention to school. So these fathers want to be involved, which is, I love it.
Yeah. Which
Generational.
is excellent because guess what? Sometimes if there's one kid in one sport, he'll take it. If there's two kids in two sports, we both got to participate. But sometimes if there's one practice, he'll just be like, I'll go with the kid, like, and then that's that. And mom gets, 30 minutes off. So,
I want to actually transition into gender roles. We have a really great topic on that. And we can start with Marilyn's comment. She said, I try to treat my ex-husband as my equal and not as someone greater than me. Him and his ego couldn't handle it. And he used to repeatedly try and make me feel like I wasn't on his level. So I think that narcissistic tendencies again. And this instance, so it seems a little bit flipped. He thinks that he's better than her versus like, you need to work, like do my things.
right. Yeah, that's just it's unbelievable to me, especially in this time frame when women are, you know, they're so much more educated than like we're raised differently. We were raised differently, and it's a testament to our parents that did immigrate that we were required to. I don't know about all of you, but my mom was like, "Why am I going to your college graduation? Just let me know when you get a master's." Like there was no like the idea of being independent as a woman was something that we were raised with. And yes, you get married, but there was, at least for me, never a pressure of I have to stay home as opposed to work. That if I ever did, it was my choice.
Right.
So I think
I think
hopefully it's changing.
I would say though, Shaylee, that I think that there's some subconscious things at play though, because I know like for me, I grew up in an immigrant household, lots of extended family, and I didn't have a single example of a working woman. Everyone stayed home.
Yeah.
And so, yes, while the whole reason they came to America was to get an education and to have the kids be educated and all of this. So, yes, I went to college and went to medical school and became a doctor. It didn't matter. I mean, like COVID
It's a
happened,
no.
and I've been a doctor for 25 years, and COVID happened, and not once did my parents ever say like, what's it like being a physician during the pandemic? It's still like, wait, but
Right.
who's feeding the kids and how are you getting home in
Right.
time? And so I think I came into marriage not necessarily with these progressive ideas of equality. I just kind of very naturally slid into, the domestic role. It wasn't even
Hmm.
necessarily put on me, but I took it. And I think then there becomes some learned helplessness and, like just
Yeah.
natural falling into traditional roles. And you kind of take on this like, divide and conquer, you know, divide and division of forces kind of approach, especially as you build a family. And we've got three kids, and it's not until things slow down that you're like, whoa, like where did
What's
this
happening?
disparity come in? And you are
Yeah.
resentful, but really you just never even really talked about it.
Right. And let me just put this out there because I think it is important when I am talking about myself. I was raised with a working mother, and a
Mm,
working
yeah,
grandmother. So for me to be a stay-at-home mom for 10 years of my life was the anomaly, and it was rough. It was
yeah,
hard for me to say I'm not going to work. So my mom is like a retired orthodontist at this point. My grandmother was a doctor, and it was very abnormal. I am very aware of that because I
yeah,
saw, all our family friends, most of them, my parents met in dental school, so we grew up with all of the dentists that they went to school with, but all their wives were home.
yeah,
Um, but my mom was one of the two or three exceptions, and so it is a little bit different because then that example of something where both parents are earning and have to participate. I mean, my mom still took the bulk of the mental load. She still
yep,
did, all the kids and arranging and all that. But my dad showed up for being an older generation Indian man for anything that he needed to be there for, he was there for. So I don't think we could have expected anymore in terms of that. And even now, like, man, when I get sick, it's dad, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like I don't even talk to I just go straight to my dad. So it it does change, I know. And I think again, I'm in a minority with this,
yeah. You're lucky.
versus
You're lucky to have
yeah,
that example because I think otherwise
yeah,
you just don't know. And I not for nothing, I looked up to so many women in my family as like these like empathic, generous, they always had a smile on their face.
Right.
They took care of the elders and they always did everything with grace and love. And I looked up to them. And so I really
Yeah.
on like I want to be that and I want to be a great physician and a great friend and a great mom and a great what, like and it's like at some point there's too many.
Something breaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easy
Well, that's, yeah, that
to
goes into an entirely different conversation of what we're expected to succeed at and be great at. And we have to be great moms and we have to be great professionals. And there's no break in between. And so I feel like I think, a more generalized, not even just to Indians, it's a more generalized motherhood story.
I
So,
actually wanted to interject when you brought up that point earlier. I think it's the American story because, quick anecdote, one of my family friends, she is almost 40. She just had her third baby, but in
mhm,
India. And everybody was like, "Oh yeah, it's easy. Who cares over there, right?" Because she's from America. She got married and lives over there now. And was thinking about, we were talking, I'm like, over there, they're
you help.
expected still to be wives and mothers. Yeah, they go to school. If they want to have careers, great. But that pressure, that expectation is not there. And that just
Mhm.
blew my mind. She's 2 years younger than me. And she just had her third baby because why not? She can. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the motherhood is it's its own different beast. But in terms of, I mean, I'm saying I hope the men of our generation level up in general. And I think, the women also have to level up in the sense of we also expect better for all of us, right? We expect better for ourselves. We marry men that treat us how we deserve to be treated, and do not get married for the sake of marriage. I mean, that goes both ways. It's not healthy for anybody to just do it because everyone's pressuring you to. And I get it because I do see it still, right? We have friends. All of us probably have friends that are fighting those battles still all the time in their 40s. They're not married, but it's their choice. If they're fine with it, then it's okay. Um, and I think maybe we're better about not pushing, but I don't know about the generation above us.
Well, I think that's why like these conversations are so important and important for like Indian communities to start like really trying to encourage more open, honest conversations. Don't just
Yeah.
celebrate the 20th anniversary, ask if how their marriage is doing, like,
Yeah.
ask women how they're doing, ask men how they're doing in their marriages, because otherwise it's like, okay, like if you have the option between staying single or being in a bad relationship where you're so
Oh,
lonely and it's painful and you're suffering, like people will think twice about that as opposed to
Yeah.
just checking off boxes and this is the next thing I should be doing.
Well, I'll throw something else out there to encourage, in terms of men. My husband told me a little while ago that he realized that, of course, like they don't talk about a lot of the stuff, like the vulnerability, emotion, even health stuff, right? General health stuff that all men over 40 will probably go through or have deal. And he's like, you know what? I just threw it out there to one of my friends one time. And then that guy just opened up. So the idea of, again, just talking about it,
Yep.
because it doesn't need to be something you carry on your own. And it doesn't even need to be something you carry only with your spouse.
Yep.
There have those friendships that both, people can kind of share and grow and have somebody to lean on that will look, as much as I love my husband, if he's going through man stuff and something's, going on there that like he'll get birth to a degree. He's not going to get all of it. That only comes from the women who have given birth. So same on the other side, like there are things I'm just not going to get. And he should have people he can communicate with. But that only happens if you share.
Yeah.
I want to stick with gender roles just for one more. Because this is single to Shaadi, we also do something that's called second time Shaadi, really with people, a situation, maybe they've had kids, they haven't kids, but just looking for a different experience in this next relationship, right? Hopefully, like their greatest relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that stigma. In all candidness, I might not have read every single story, so I'm not sure if you addressed dating in the, no, okay. But I don't know if you,
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Go ahead and finish your question, then I can tell you.
You personally have, right? You've been remarried now. We like this amazing relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that stigma, right? How do families, societies, how do people in the South Asian community treat women differently, treat men differently, or is it the same after a divorce?
Um, I think it depends on the man, right? The person you're dating. Let me put it that way, because it can go either way. It depends on the person you're dating. Because when I started dating again, literally the first thing I would tell, especially an Indian person that would ask me out, I've been divorced. If you can't handle it, just keep walking. Like I'm not going to get into a battle with your family over this if you can't back me up. And so it was the first thing I said, and you would be surprised of how many men still wanted to, give it a try. And I was like, okay, like, well, then it goes back to normal standards of dating, right? Like, do we match? Do we have fun? The blah blah same stuff. But I think you take away the stigma if you just own it. I mean, I was just like, I've been there. I've been divorced. It wasn't, and I think again, the one of the biggest things that needs to come down in our community is nobody's first choice is divorce. No one's divorcing for fun. When we get to the point of divorce, that means we have tried everything else that we possibly could to survive it. Like, I think for a lot of us still, we are either depressed, we are at rock bottom or very close to it, and it could be a matter of life and death at that point. Um, and I say it and it sounds a little bit over exaggerated, but I actually do believe that's true because we're not at a point where the stigma doesn't exist, and we're not at a point where we're going to make this. We marry families. How many times have we been told that? It affects everybody. So making that choice isn't an easy one, and I don't believe there's a single person who has ever gone into that lightly. So if the community as a whole can accept she got divorced, she made a hard decision and she's doing this, that, whatever now. So it's, great for her. I think that would lighten that load a little bit.
Hmm.
So in terms of dating again, I think if you own it, own your experience. Why be ashamed of the fact that you had to make a hard choice and then you got through it, you survived it. And now maybe you're even thriving from there. You're out there trying again, that's also really hard.
Yeah.
So,
Of
um,
red meat out there. I know
yeah.
that you mentioned why hide it. This is something that commonly when you are out there trying to date again, maybe sometimes your first relationship you didn't use, right? You were young, you met in college, whatever, you didn't use dating apps. Now you're out here on these streets trying to get back into it and people are lying about their status, lying about how many they
Mm,
have, so but I feel like it's 90% men when I hear these stories. And again, it's anecdotally, this is what I'm hearing, but it's mostly men. Why is it brazen? Like, why do they feel like they can put that out there? Why do they toy with the concept? Like, it's such a heavy thing. As you mentioned, people don't take this lightly. Why is it
yeah.
something that they can get away with? Yeah.
I have no idea. And to be honest, I think I started dating my husband right prior to dating apps becoming a thing.
Okay.
So I never ended up I never ended up using a dating app because that just wasn't in the cards for me. And I met him right before, and we have, I mean, plenty of friends that have successfully found their match through a dating app somewhere, and the person is great and they have happy marriages. I think you just need to. I don't know about lying. I don't know about lying because I'm not good at it. Like I personally would rather just this is who I am. I mean, as I'm talking here it is. So I don't understand why anyone would feel the need to lie, but that also, right, in itself is a red flag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, why have a relationship with someone who can lie about something so simple at the beginning?
Totally. I think it's good. Good weed out process. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, in terms of dating, again, I would say go out and do stuff you love to do. It'll create the right aura around you because you'll be happy doing what you love to do, and the right person will somehow find you that way, you know?
Yeah. And if you haven't read the book, it's totally fine. Like, I mean, these are always kind of some topics that everybody can kind of relate to. You're definitely welcome to jump in. Um, So again, sticking with this topic of dating, a common, I think, hard part of it is when you're dating with children. There's the stigmas. We're talking about that cultural expectation, right? That men are just looking to find a mother for the kids. We talked about finding a mother for themselves the first time around. Now they're looking to find a mother for their kids. But then I know there's genuine people out there that just didn't have a good relationship. So there's stigma that both men and women are feeling. And we're talking about their children. Like this isn't something that you can just like change. So that it makes it really, really hard when it comes to dating. Did you maybe face any of that? Did you encounter any of that when you were talking to people?
Um, in terms of children and the stigma that comes along with having children while you're going into dating,
Right.
I actually did not. I think in general, most of the people that I had discussed any of this with did not have children. It ended before that. I mean, there are a few, but again, I think that it's a red flag issue, right? If either the person and be upfront, I have a kid. You come into this open-eyed or you don't,
Right.
and that's just the way it would be. I think the simpler we make it and the more honest we make it and the more true to ourselves we are, the easier it is on us. Like unless you feel this enormous pressure that you have to get married for some reason, which we're hoping that that is not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I don't see the harm of because there are plenty of men out there that happily will merge with your family if and they will fall in love with your kid too, or women, I guess, also as well. I mean, we see how many step families around us, you know? There's it's just a different type of family. So I think as long as again we're honest and true to ourselves when we go out there, it should be all right. But in terms of the Indian community, and if they have an issue with it, unless you're completely opposed to dating someone of any other nationality, um, there's probably men or women out there that are perfectly fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I personally can't imagine ever being with somebody Indian again. Like, I feel like it's just been so
From
traumatizing.
it.
There's just so many reproducible examples of the same like pattern over and over and over again. So the thought of even like
But
potentially through that again, even in the dating process, just feels so daunting. I don't know.
and that's okay, and that's completely fine. I am gonna throw out there, there also are men that are not mama's boys. There are men that are trying to change, and especially once they have a girl, they're trying to change the world for their girl.
Yeah.
Um, there are the ones that can see you as an equal, um, versus, the wife or the mother. And it just it's a person thing,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately, if we're surrounded, your examples are going to be one way, because your sample size is one way.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
um, yeah, it's just a matter of and dating. What is I've always called it interview to marriage, like to some
Yep.
degree. Like it's just you're interviewing a bunch of different people. I'd say just go out and have fun, especially if you're not necessarily looking to get married at all. I mean, I'll tell you, for my husband, the reason why I stuck with him was when I had gotten out of my last marriage and I was about 28, 29, which means guess what? All the men that you meet are looking to get married and I was not. But I could feel that pressure from them every time any of them asked me out, anytime I went on a date with them. And my husband came along and he was like, let's just go have fun. And we were almost like, it was fun. It was friends and hanging out. And I never felt like it had to end in marriage. There was kind of a mutual idea that, hey, if this, we'll have fun until it doesn't work. Um, and then we ended up married because we just kept having fun, I guess.
That's awesome.
So
Same advice.
yeah,
Even if you are dating for marriage, please still date and have fun. I say on the other side,
have
people
fun.
people are too much like it's not exactly what I want. I won't even go out on a date. So I don't flip it the other way either. As
Yeah.
we're winding down, please, if you guys have, you're welcome to jump on, unmute yourselves, come on camera, whatever. I'm gonna kind of wind up with a few questions here, but you guys jump on. Shaylee, empowerment. The whole
Yes.
reason you wrote this book, the whole reason you're sharing these stories is because you want people to be empowered to make the decisions and choices for them. So tell us maybe how does this book highlight the empowerment and the choices that people made for themselves?
Well, I think once they gave themselves the option, right? It's initially when you get married, you think I'm locked in. That's it. I can't, there's no other choice. Once you give that choice to yourself, I think you can make a better decision. Now, it may be that you don't want to get out of the marriage and you want to work on it, and that's great. But I think if you force people to think that there's only one right answer, it makes you stuck. It makes you claustrophobic. But you give two choices, and it gives you a better chance of making a decision that works for you. Um, I wanted to talk about it. I mean, my biggest reason was just because I just think more people need to talk about it. There's plenty of us out there that have gone through it. There are plenty of us that have chosen to remain single, are dating, got remarried, have built a family with, or built blended families or whatever. And there's everything is okay. Everything is okay. Like, I think our community has raised us to think only one type of version is okay, but everything is okay. So that's kind of where I want to get with this, in terms of not only relationships and marriage, but mental health, having kids on your own, adopting, whatever it is, everything is okay as long as you're doing it for the right reasons.
Just need love. Absolutely. It looks
Yeah.
like people are jumping off. Well, Shaylee, I just want to say thank you
Yeah.
so much. Is there any project coming up? Any way we can all support you and the work you're doing?
Um, I mean, I love speaking at these things. So anytime you want me on as a guest, I'm more than happy to come. I am working on two different books, but I'm also working and raising kids. So I COVID was a great time to write. Let me put it that way. So I'm hoping like my next book, the idea is to write for the preteen segment. We don't talk about relationships and love with our kids all the time. And I
Mhm.
wanted to open up discussion about crushes and such with that. And I base it off the conversations I have with my daughter. And so I'm working on that, and that's my next project. So hopefully, it gets moving a little bit and it comes out soon. But yeah,
Well,
I mean, I'm on at Shailee Mehta the rights. So unfortunately, I'm not a great poster, but I try.
and the links are in your confirmation email, everybody. If you click on her
Yes.
name, it'll take you to her Instagram. Definitely connect with Shaylee. And yeah, please let us know how we can support you in the future. We'll feature that next book.
Yeah,
Ronak definitely wants to do a part two, so we'll maybe have to set something
let's
else
do it.
up.
I would
Absolutely.
so love a part two, so I can actually chat more. I was doing other things today, and I had not read the book, but I promise I'll read it by next time. Yeah,
Absolutely. We'll do
Always down. Let's do it.
yeah,
Really,
yeah. It
thank
was
you
really
so
good.
much for your time, your energy, and giving space to this topic. Everybody on the call, thank you all for joining. I'm about to finalize the November book. I know Thanksgiving is happening, so it's probably going to be a quick, short read and earlier in the month, so that'll be out soon. But have a great rest of your night, everybody. Happy Diwali for everybody who celebrates, and enjoy the clocks falling back this weekend. Bye all.